You think you've seen it all? Picture this. Moving into your dream cabin by a quiet lake. Your life finally feels complete, and then, on day one, your neighbor calls the police on you because your moving truck is disrupting community peace. Yeah, that happened. And this wasn't some cranky old lady. This was Victoria Cross, the president of the Lakeside Meadows Homeowners Association. She strutted over like she was the sheriff, clipboard in hand, absolutely convinced she was the law. What she didn't know, she'd just awakened someone who wouldn't let her lies slide in soon. Her little kingdom was about to crumble. After years of saving every penny from my job making video games, I had finally bought my slice of heaven, a $500,000 cabin on Clear Blue Lake. I imagined quiet mornings with coffee on the deck, maybe even learning to fish like my dad used to. The moving truck rolled in, the sun was sparkling on the water, and for a fleeting moment, I was the luckiest person alive. Then Victoria appeared. Silver hair in a tight bun, white shirt, khakis, and an attitude like she owned the place. She stared at my boxes, my truck, even how I breathed. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough to scare the birds. "Your truck is blocking traffic." I looked around. The street was empty. Birds chirped. My truck was fully in my driveway. "I can move it right now," I said. But she wasn't listening. She dialed 911, reported a traffic hazard caused by my moving truck, and smiled at me like she'd already won. 10 minutes later, a police car arrived. Officer Johnson sighed as he looked at the empty street and my truck. "Mrs. Cross," he said kindly, "the truck's on his property, not blocking traffic." I wanted to smile, but Victoria's eyes were still fixed on my cabin, hungry, like a dragon guarding what she claimed was hers. 3 days later, I tried to build a small dock, just a little 6x6 platform to enjoy the water. I followed all the rules, studied city and HOA regulations, and submitted a 23-page application. Denied. Incomplete environmental study. Okay, fine. Hired an $800 environmental expert. Denied again. Materials aren't beautiful enough for community standards. I upgraded the wood. Denied. Visual offense. Even when I shrank the dock to almost nothing, the HOA demanded signatures from 75% of neighbors. Door to door, I learned most wanted no trouble with Victoria. A few laughed at my futility, but one man, Walter Hayes, a retired professor, whispered, "Anything to do with the lake around here is complicated." Something in his eyes told me he knew more than he was saying. I got signatures from about 60% of the neighbors, not enough. Then came the final, chilling email, an official HOA property map showing the entire lakeshore, including the part behind my house, belonged to the HOA. I read it over and over. I bought a lakefront home, and I couldn't even reach the lake. It felt like owning a car, but being forbidden to drive it. Thursday morning, I had enough. I stepped toward the water, testing their claim. 20 feet from a lake, Victoria appeared like she'd materialized from thin air, clipboard and phone ready, shouting about trespassing and recording me like I was some exotic animal. 15 minutes later, Officer Johnson arrived. Victoria presented her map, full of confidence, while I calmly handed over my Folder County surveys, historical property records from 1963, and permits for the dock. The officer's expression shifted as he compared her map to real property lines. Finally, he told Victoria, "This is private property. He has every right to be here." The walk back to my deck felt like 30 feet of public defeat. Victoria stood with crossed arms, smug. But that was only the beginning. Feeling hopeless, I dug into property law online, old rules, historical rights. Saturday morning, I knocked on Walter's door. I barely knew him, but something in his eyes during my door-to-door visit told me he had secrets. He laughed when he saw Victoria's map. "Son, this map is fake. Completely fake. She's always been good with computers." Inside, he pulled out a shoebox of old photos and documents, showing Victoria's father, Henry Cross, signing papers in the 60s with a sign behind him, "Public Lake Access Permanent by County Order." My heart raced. This was my key. I had the legal right to the lake, just like every other property owner along this shore. Next step, county records. Monday morning, Walter and I sifted through dusty cabinets at the courthouse. Clerk Sarah pulled files from 1963. Hidden in legal jargon was the guarantee: permanent public access to the lake for all lakefront owners. Victoria's map was not only fake, it was illegal. We ordered a $3,000 professional land survey to confirm boundaries. Meanwhile, I examined HOA budgets and spending for 15 years. $47,000 collected for lake maintenance money vanished. No equipment, no contracts, nothing. Fraud. Friday, the survey company called. You have full legal lake access. The HOA never owned any part of the lake. They've been collecting fees illegally. My blood boiled. This wasn't just about my dock anymore. It was about justice for the whole neighborhood. Victoria had been using fear and lies to control everyone, and I now had the evidence to turn the tables. The plan, act defeated, let Victoria think she'd won. She fell for it completely, posting no trespassing signs, parading along the lake, confident in her victory. I watched, counting the days. Then she sent the perfect email: final resolution of property dispute, giving a date to remove my home. She just confessed in writing. I called a high-end security gate company and installed a custom steel gate, cameras covering every angle. County permits in hand, I ignored the HOA. Had no authority. Victoria, predictably, freaked out. She called the police, waving her fake map, shouting about unauthorized structures. Officer Johnson arrived, listened to her, then looked at my folder. Official county survey, historical records, permits all in order. Her confident expression melted. Neighbors gathered, curious. Walter showed the 1963 photograph. The evidence was undeniable. I spoke to the crowd. For 15 years, we've been paying $50 a month to an organization that has no legal right to manage the lake. Faces went pale. Murmurs turned into outrage. Victoria tried to defend herself, claiming she was protecting what her father built. The crowd wasn't buying it. I walked to my new gate, placed a bronze plaque, public lake access, permanent right from 1963. The HOA has no authority. Pressed the remote steel gate slid shut with a satisfying click. Justice. Neighbors cheered, some planning legal action for the stolen money. Children ran to the lake, laughter echoing across the water for the first time in years. I handed Walter the remote, tears in his eyes. The video of Victoria's breakdown and the gate closing went viral locally, sparking conversations about HOA abuse across the state. Sometimes a regular person can take on power, stand up for what's right, and actually win. And now, the lake belongs to all of us, just like it was meant to be. So, tell me would you have done if you were in my shoes? Comment below, share your thoughts on property rights, and let's talk about when standing up for yourself is not just bravate's necessary. After that morning, things changed fast. Victoria went from confident queen of a lake to someone who couldn't even look people in the eye. But make no mistake, she didn't disappear quietly. Oh no, she started scrambling behind the scenes, making calls, sending emails, trying to find a loophole or a technicality she could exploit. I knew she was dangerous, not because she had legal power, but because she had experience weaponizing bureaucracy and fear. I spent the next week watching, waiting, and planning. Every time Victoria left her house, I could see her scanning my property, checking cameras, trying to gauge whether I'd found some new angle to mess with her control. And I had me security system was rolling, recording everything, and I was ready for the next move. I also spent hours helping neighbors understand what had happened, quietly pointing out the evidence. Survey maps, old county records, historical photos. People started whispering to each other, realizing just how much they'd been lied to for years. Then came a first real test. Victoria, desperate, sent a formal complaint to the county claiming I had altered the shoreline illegally, that my gate was obstructing community access. I calmly forwarded her complaint to my lawyer, along with the full survey, the historical records, and the 1963 documents Walter had uncovered. Every attempt she made to intimidate me backfired spectacularly. The county basically laughed at her claims as everything I had done was within my rights. What really turned the tide was when neighbors started stepping up. The couple with the kayaks, the woman from House 12, even a few who had been hesitant during my door-to-door campaign, they began showing support, offering statements, confirming they'd never been asked to pay for lake maintenance beyond what was legal. Victoria's control was unraveling in plain sight. One morning, I watched her approach the lake with her usual stern march, clipboard ready, probably planning to yell at anyone daring to touch the water. I stepped onto my dock, casually sipping coffee, camera rolling just in case. She froze mid-step, realized I wasn't intimidated, and then tried to bark orders. The moment she opened her mouth, a crowd of neighbors who had gathered quietly started murmuring, slowly turning into audible disapproval. Victoria looked around, flustered, realizing for the first time that her power depended entirely on fear and secrecy, and now the secrecy was gone. The final blow came when I invited Walter to give a short speech by the lake. Holding up that black and white photograph from 1963, he explained to everyone how Victoria's father had sold the land but had been legally obligated to maintain public lake access for all property owners. "She's known this all along," Walter said, calm but firm. "And she's been hiding it." The crowd gasped. Whispers turned to outrage. Victoria's face went pale. She tried to argue, to rationalize, but nobody listened. Her credibility was gone. I pressed the remote, sliding the gate, closed fully, the metallic click echoing like a gavel in a courtroom. Cheers erupted. Children ran down to the water, splashing, laughing. The community had reclaimed the lake, both physically and morally. Emails, social media posts, local news clips. Within hours, the story spread. Other neighborhoods shared their own HOA horror stories, inspired by what we had done. But here's the thing, this wasn't just revenge. It wasn't about humiliating Victoria, though, yeah, that was satisfying. It was about setting a precedent. Knowledge is power, and standing up with evidence can level the playing field, even against someone who thinks bureaucracy is their personal weapon. And we'd done it together. Neighbors who had been silent finally spoke. People who thought the rules were untouchable saw that they could actually challenge them. I still check the lake every morning, watching families enjoy what's rightfully theirs, and I can't help but smile. There's something electric about seeing justice unfold slowly, with every tiny victory stacking up and knowing it's permanent. Victoria? She still lives here, yes, but her aura of invincibility is gone. Now, whenever she looks at the lake, she sees a community, not a kingdom she can control. And me? I learned something critical sometimes. The law is on your side, but it takes courage, patience, and a little creativity to wield it. Sometimes, being calm, collecting proof, and letting someone's own arrogance work against them is the most satisfying strategy of all. So I'll leave you with this. If you ever feel trapped by someone abusing power, whether it's a neighborhood association, a boss, or even an online scammer, remember it's not always about fighting loudly. Sometimes it's about fighting smart. And yes, sometimes it's about making them think they've already won while you quietly gather the tools to turn the tables. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to wield rules like a weapon? How did you respond, or how would you? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's talk about justice, standing your ground, and how the little guy can sometimes beat the big one when the cards are stacked against you.